and welcome to the debate. I'm your host, Maqbool, with you at PTV World. In today's show, we're going to be taking a look at two important stories. The first is in reference to what is going on in the UK and, of course, the situation that came up since the end of July is something now that is a much larger issue for the UK government to tackle. And this is, of course, something which we have seen develop over the last couple of days and weeks, and that has resulted in the arrest of about 500 people. And this is, of course, something that the UK Prime Minister said that there is going to be no let up about. There is going to be strict action with regards to the criminal justice system that he said is going to be taking its course, and something that we're going to be seeing resulting in justice in about a week or so. He's also talked about how there is going to be all-out effort with regards to stopping any more far-right activists and demonstrations to occur in different parts of the UK, and of course any other riots to happen with the kind of violence that we have seen against, unfortunately, minorities and immigrants within the UK. This is, of course, something that has also been seen within the UK, that there are many who have stood up against this, and many anti-racism protests have been seen across the United Kingdom with reference to what has been going on. And that's, of course, encouraging to see, with the UK also talking with the top political leaders and the police leadership as well in order to curtail the situation, and they have been deployed in mass numbers across the country. But of course, it remains to be seen how much of this can actually be controlled, especially in the way that we have seen it also move to different places with reference to Ireland and others as well. And so we're going to take a look at what exactly will be the scenario in terms of the control that the UK Prime Minister wants to hold, and whether or not that will be sustainable, and how exactly will then this be prevented, and what is it more evident or evidence of with reference to how we have seen the society evolve and develop, and issues such as racism and Islamophobia take root. So we're going to be taking a look at that in the first segment of the show today. Our next one is going to be taking a look at what is happening around the world with reference to terrorism, and of course something that we've seen and talked about many times before from Pakistan's perspective, as well as the emerging threats coming in from the region, particularly in Afghanistan, where safe havens for terrorist organizations exist, and where ISK has, of course, been taking root for quite some time now. And now we've seen that the UN has also actually recognized this and has spoken about how this is an issue that poses a real threat to the region, to Europe, to other parts of the world, and of course something that has the potential to spread internationally. And so we're going to be taking a look at what that means in terms of protecting Afghanistan from going back to a country which is full of terrorist threats, which is full of the kind of chaos that we've seen earlier as well, and to be a place for these groups to mobilize themselves. So we're going to be taking a look particularly with ISK, and then of course what is going to be the world's response as we see the situation deteriorate in Afghanistan and the threat that this poses to world peace. That is going to be our focus in the second segment of the show today. For this and more, as always, in the studios, I've been joined by senior analyst Farrukh Pitafi and Faisal. And for our first segment, with reference to the situation in UK, we've been joined by Mr. Umar, who's a research fellow at the University of Birmingham, and by Mubashar Chaudhry, who's a human rights activist. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being part of the discussion. And Umar, I'm going to start with you first with reference to your analysis of the situation in terms of what we've seen. And of course, this is something that has been triggered by a certain event, by the murders of 3 children and injuries to others, and then of course spread about on social media in terms of the false identity of the suspect. And then now we've seen that the situation is much, much larger than what it started off with. But it does, of course, point towards larger problems as well that the UK has had to face for quite some time now, and now, of course, cannot possibly avoid. So I want your take first on what these issues represent, and how do you see the way that the UK government is responding to it?
So thank you for having me on the show. I think that this latest episode of this writing, which actually started as far-right protesters coming and occupying, I would say, different public spheres, different public spaces within different cities in northern UK. It has laid bare the presence of racism and Islamophobia within the British political sphere. within the way it was covered, the way it had been building up within the British media, and also, and most importantly, I think, within certain sections of the British civil society. And all of this has culminated, it has been triggered by this incident in Southport. But I would say another key triggerhead, or another key development that has been pushing this was the events of October 7th, the war in Gaza, and the impact of the Middle Eastern crisis on British politics, and the way certain elements within mainstream British political parties have responded to it, and the way peaceful protesters who were protesting for Palestine, for Gaza, and humanitarian and ceasefire were targeted for months. And I think all of this, in a manner, encouraged certain these elements which were present, and everyone knows that they are present within the British civic sphere, to come out and do acts of vandalism, acts of rioting, and and to target British Muslims specifically. I mean, this was clear-cut targeting of brown people, of black people, of people who are from and also from an ethnic minority background. So this was very targeted. You can say, I would say, a targeted political movement, and all of these stakeholders, they had been culpable. They must account for it. And even now we see that specifically people at the topest level of the Conservative Party, they're not really backing down or shying down from the blatant Islamophobic rhetoric. And it's being projected on British media outlets as well. So even though that the situation is fading now, but the problem and the institutionalization of this problem is very much there and is very much acute.
I want your perspective also with reference to what has been going on the ground. Of course, we've seen these far-right riots taking place, but at the same time, we've also been seeing that there has been a lot of protests with regards to anti-racism. And this is something important as well, that while we talk about fighting what is embedded perhaps within the community and which has just taken the forefront in the aftermath of these incidents and the kind of social media falsehood that we've just seen, requires, of course, an in-depth analysis of what is going on, but also in terms of how differently people of the UK have reacted, and how there are communities or aspects of the community that, of course, understand what the situation is. But I want your perspective on how difficult that task is and what really needs to be done in order to counter these thoughts, and especially with regards to racism and immigrants.
Sana, you want my view?
Yes, Mubashar sir.
Yeah, hi, Sana. Thank you very much for having me. I think Umar explained a bit about why these incidents are happening. Definitely, Southport was a trigger point, but in reality, that has nothing to do with these far right. If we see the general election 2024, the Reform UK was the party who was somehow politically representing those far right ideologies. And their candidates, the way they campaigned, that fueled up. Think in a way, they have 600 plus candidates in whole of the United Kingdom. And the way they campaigned against Muslims, against immigrants and all of that, that has fueled up. And when those voices went into the parliament, because they managed to get the 5 seats into the parliament, and people like Nigel Farage, when he started talking in the parliament, the things people were thinking is not a nice thing to say, eventually that triggered, and the people think it is okay to say, to speak against Muslims, to speak against immigrants, and these type of things like actually fueled. But if we see Britain is very multicultural society. But Britain is divided into rural and urban areas as well. If you see the cities, cities are well mixed with the multicultural environment. And then you see in the cities, mostly the people do understand what is the value of the immigrant in the society and how the society has been built up. And the Britain, which is Britain today, it is definitely the immigrants have a major part in it. If you see, the last prime minister was the son of an immigrant. The London mayor is the son of an immigrant. Even Hamza Yusuf in Scotland, the first minister, was the son of an immigrant. And even when you go to see the doctors in NHS and all of that, so people do understand that. So when this far right started, obviously first like people, it was the sudden, the last Saturday especially, and before that it was in the Southport. So there was a little chance for people to react. But when on this Wednesday, when they were called on few places, and this time especially, they targeted the areas where there was more Muslim, or I would say multicultural majorities living, that trigger anti-protest, like, so the people come out. So for example, I can give you an example in Bristol. So there is an area where there's a majority population living there is ethnic minority. They said they're gonna come there, and there are a couple of mosques there. And I reluctantly went there just to see, like, you know, how things goes. But when I went there, it amazed, like, you know, I was heartbroken. And when I seen those scenes, like, you know, it looks like whole of the Bristol came there to support the Muslim, to support the migrants, and are against these fascism. And the full street was like, looks like a party. So, you know, the people were chanting for Palestine, pro-immigration. And that was the real Britain we have seen on Wednesday. And I think this is the best way you can tackle the situation. And obviously, alongside, we need to be much more responsible at this point, because if it happens, obviously what they're looking for, the agitation or the counter attack from the communities, the BAME communities, especially the Muslim community. And there are some far-right media wings who would really love to capture those images, and they will put all the stories behind, and they would like to highlight just those images. So my request to all the Muslim community living in the United Kingdom, I would request them, please do not be part of those agitations, and counter them with the love. And I'm sure through this we can give a much stronger message.
Absolutely, and Chaudhry Sahab, I appreciate that. But of course, it is very, very tough to have that sort of response as well, especially when we've been hearing reports of people really being scared about their lives. And of course, when campaigns are run against you, there are people who are protesting or having movements against a certain community or a certain faith. And it's, of course, very, very hard. So I want your perspective in the way that the general Muslim community actually does look at the situation, and especially in the ways that the UK government can provide them the sense of security.
You know, I don't know if you heard about Hamza Yusuf interview. So Hamza Yusuf is the first minister born in Scotland. And his word was like, I cannot be the less Scottish than anyone else. He said, like, his father came from Pakistan, and he used to keep his Pakistani passport and Pakistani ID card, and we used to laugh at him, like, why you have the British, you are British now, why are you keeping that passport, and why you want us to have that passport? And then he used to say, you know, you never know, one day you will come across. I was crossing, you know, the road, and I come across those protesters, and they were so violent. For me, probably I could observe, but my son, who born here, he was shocked, because he thinks this is my country, and they are saying, go back home. So which home? Like, I mean, I feel this is my home. So it's a genuinely concern for especially the people who born here, who are so much linked and who love this country. And it's the point. They need a comfort from from the community. They need a comfort from the government. Definitely, it's not easy, but like if we stay united and if we stay within the law, respond responsibly, I can tell you this will whitewash. This is not the first time happened. Unfortunately, because at the moment the far right is getting the popularity in most part of Europe. You can see in USA. So this is impacting here in the United Kingdom as well. And the kind of like points they do have against the immigrant, against the Islam and Muslims, and especially through the social media, the way they spread out, a lot of lies in it. And I think this is the time for us to come back and then tell, what you are telling is absolutely wrong. And we need to engage with there are a lot of multi-faith organizations here. We need to be part of that. And we need to engage our politicians as well. We should be active politically, and we should be active to give our message forward. So one of the example, I think they tried to attack one of the mosques, and the mosque imam came out. And instead of like, have a fear, so he comes out and he started speaking to some of those far rights. And he said, what are your concerns? They talk about immigration, they talk about, economic instability and all of that. He said, like, all of these things, we do have the concern on them too. And that was a different scene, to be honest. I think like if we play a leadership role here, we can bring the difference. It's definitely a challenging time. It is the time you need to be a bit more careful as compared to when you go out freely without a fear. So now it is definitely, especially for women who can be seen through their dress, like, as a Muslim. So it's definitely a bit of challenging. But I'm sure, like, if we do play a leadership role here, we can settle that down.
I fully agree with you. And Sana, with your permission, I wanted to add in a few things as well. Because, as you know, I have spent a fair bit of time in Britain. I have studied from there. And I just wanted to share something which I faced back in 2006, right after 7/7 bombings. The mood was, of course, quite similar to what it is today. And I still remember there's a place called Maidenhead that's not far from London itself. And I was on the high street of Maidenhead, and I faced them kind of slurs and the racist slurs I was facing from that side. But as earlier Mubashar Chaudhry mentioned, rightly pointed out about Bristol, same was the case in Maidenhead. When I saw them standing in front of me, they were around 10 people. But suddenly, when I checked on my side of the road, there were more people with me, standing with me against them. And that is the British society we always highlight, and this is the beauty of British society. If there are odd, rotten people out there, then you have 10 times, or I would say hundreds of times better people there who are standing with the good rather than the evil. The one who were facing me from the opposite side, they were the evil side of Britain, and they are very less in number, minute numbers. But when it comes to the good side of Britain, they are enormous in numbers. So we always give example of British society, and that's how it is. And my majority of my family, they live in northwest of Britain. There's a city called Preston. Majority of the people out there, of course, Indian Muslims and Pakistani Muslims are there as well. They never feel anything like that in there. Yes, there are certain areas of Britain where these sort of people, on the basis of their leadership, like Tommy Robinson or Nigel Farage, as Mubashar Chaudhry has just highlighted, these kind of people are always coming up with a toxic kind of narratives against the Muslims. And then we had in the previous government people like Suella Braverman, who was always toxic against Islam, against migration, and the kind of narrative she always came up with, I think that has fueled a lot today's British society. And people like Nigel Farage, people like Suella Braverman, who in the society consider themselves as the leaders, they should be careful in the society. And I think the footsteps of Prime Minister of Britain, them needs to be followed, as he came up with the, he simply said that far right thugs will not be allowed to disrupt the peace of Britain, and that's how it should be. That is why we are seeing that people who have been contributing in this menace, they have been taken to cleaners, and this is the Britain we know, and we would always love to know that kind of Britain in coming future as well. So 100 out of 100 marks for Prime Minister of Britain, and anyone who's standing with him, and the people on the roads. And as Mubashar Chaudhry rightly pointed out, that this is the message for the Muslims and for the immigrants who are in Britain, that these people out there, the far right thugs, they actually are instigating you. They want you to make kind of mistakes they are making, so that in reaction, when you make a mistake, on the basis of that mistake, they can further flame it, and that's what they want. You don't need to give them a chance to do it. And I believe that as British society is an example, a peaceful example, and multicultural society is an example for the world, it will always remain like that, because the element of good within the British society is too big to, of course, change it.
Right. And Farrukh, I want your perspective also on in terms of what we have seen, particularly in the way that social media has played a very important role in this, and this is what Mubashar Sahab earlier was also referring to. And it's something that we in our own capacity have also experienced with the power that it has to incite violence or to influence people. And we have seen active calls coming in from different aspects of the society as well, to attack places that are sacred to certain immigrants or certain religious beliefs. And what exactly then is the way forward when we talk about, particularly in the ways in which this manifests on ground, the way that we as governments around the world can actually tackle this issue of the usage of social media for these purposes, for inciting violence, and the kind of justice that would entail?
Right. Sana, thank you very much. I think that your question actually speaks to a bigger question, and that is the challenges faced by the new Prime Minister of UK, Sir Keir Starmer, right? Before, you know that his own career has been of law enforcement and of the legal side, so he understands the legal system and the law enforcement inside out, right? And there is something that needs to be said about the way UK was governed in the past 14 years. And that actually starts with one name, and that is David Cameron. The moment he actually came to power, his austerity measure was such horrible, on one side it gutted NHS, on the other side he actually cut down law enforcement's budget as well. So in the end, what happened was that the prisons were, over capacity, and that's why many of such miscreants were allowed to be freed or, brought back to the society. And of course, policing also was affected. With this kind of situation, and then of course, they also, David Cameron also was primarily responsible for Brexit debacle. And after that, we saw that this hard right actually started getting more and more strength. And then, of course, you have Pitafi Patel and Suella Braverman. With their policies, we saw that something very interesting was happening, and that was stereotyping of Muslims. Remember that there is a simultaneous rise of far right in India also. In India's government, when it came to power, the incumbent government, it started saying that there is no such thing as saffron terrorism. Terrorism is only associated with one religion, right? and then some intelligence operation might also be taking place. We started seeing this astounding trend, or some weirdo from either Muslim community or adjacent community would come out with a knife and would actually stand on some bridge and started trying to attack people. And after that, immediately there would be fear. And then the reports in the media, especially the right-wing media, would make a mountain out of molehill and create it as the narrative around Islam being a problem or Muslims being a problem. Of course, there were many people who were unhinged, like Anjum Chaudhry, there were umpteen others as well. But because of all this, what we have seen is simultaneously creation or enabling of hard right on the racist spectrum. On the other side, we saw something else as well. On the other side, we saw a core of Muslims also getting their hardening position too. Because of that, it became very easy for somebody like Braverman to actually say that Muslims are a problem, right? But this time, there seems to be something interesting that seems to have happened. The knife wielder was not only not a Muslim, but he was almost a celebrity. At the age of 11, he had appeared in a television commercial linked to BBC as well. So he was a known quantity, right? And then all of a sudden, I don't know whether he was disaffected or what, he comes up, he stabs people, 3 children die, and as if somebody is waiting for a cue. All of a sudden, all these hard right people actually come out and they start creating chaos. Luckily, because Sir Keir Starmer knows the landscape of law enforcement, what he has done is he has increased the number of prison cells, so increased the capacity of prisons so that these hoodlums can be arrested and shouldn't be allowed immediately to go back to spread the same kind of horror show that is there. Simultaneously, of course, there is the problem of immigrants, illegal immigrants. That is something that is also being taken care of, because the previous government was only making a joke of the whole process or the concern. So with that kind of a situation, I think gradually all these concerns will go down. But the good thing, and I think that is the most important concern here, is usually these people are deterred because of effective policing. And that can't happen if the policemen actually go to enforce law and order, and what happens is these hoodlums actually attack them and beat them badly, right? So luckily, as I pointed out the other day as well, there was always a chance that UK's policing might take the American route, where they have this militarization of police, where you get gears, especially commando gear and all those heavy guns and all. That does not seem to have happened. But the new Prime Minister knows how to tackle these issues. And you actually, somebody actually mentioned, this refrain from the hard right that go back to where you came from, right? So there is a very good slogan that I seem to be hearing, I have heard actually coming from America, and that is from Kamala Harris, and that is, we won't go back. So with that kind of spirit, I hope that in coming days, all these positive elements, and I tell you that UK is inundated with good people. They have repeatedly shown their broad-mindedness, their openness of their heart to embrace change. But there are, of course, these small miscreants, and most of them are disaffected people who were told by the previous governments and Nigel Farage and people like them that the immigrants and not the bad governance was responsible for their plight.
Absolutely. And Mr. Umar, I want your take on this analysis as well, with reference to the kind of impact that this also creates in terms of the political governance, and then of course with the current government setup in the UK as well, and what that means especially in terms of the way that this will influence the issues centered around this government and of course the political dynamic of the UK.
there are some fundamental issues which the British political parties are shying away from addressing, owing to their possible political damage. And, you know, even in this situation, I mean, it is very clear there is one community, one religious community which has been targeted, and that is the Muslim community. But the British Prime Minister, he fails to mention Islamophobia in his speeches. Why can't you actually mention Islamophobia in a statement when you want to reassure? He mentions communities, but he still shies away from saying that this writing, these attacks, they were Islamophobic in nature, because they are not against white refugees. The refugees coming from Ukraine are welcome by everyone. The key point here is the targeting of people who are from Muslim countries, people who are from brown or black backgrounds, and so this needs to be addressed. I was just reading that the British government, the Prime Minister, they had not consulted till now with the Muslim Council of Britain, which is a representative body of British Muslims. Why is there no consultation? Why is there no engagement with this representative body of the Muslims? Because they can then convey the very genuine concerns of British Muslims to these to the British authorities. I fully agree with what Pitafi Sahab said, that this whole thing has been deterred by effective policing. So the people, the right-wing people, the far right or right wing, I think that they are now, the percentage is growing, because the Reform Party, it got 14% of votes in the last elections. And all, you can say, moderate conservatives, they, in a way, they either didn't vote for the Conservative Party or they switched towards Labour. So I would also argue that the 24% of vote which the Conservatives got, they also include a fair bit of these far right wingers as well. So there is a significant percentage of the British society, owing to, of course, bad governance, owing to the gaslighting of Muslims all across the world by the consecutive British governments, and particularly the policies and weaponization of the issues of refugees by people like Priti Patel or Suella Braverman and others, and the rather apologetic stance taken up by the current British government. I mean, these riots could have been stopped right on the first day, but because the government was caught nabbing, because the government was not ready to take up this issue from its horns, I think this spread. And I mean, we need to go beyond these debates that Britain is a good society, is multicultural. This is we are embracing a quarter of the 21st century, and Muslim women, they had to really think about whether they should leave the home or not. Forget about other people. It is clear that you, with a critical identity marker, you are not safe in UK, and you are now safe just because the police has cracked down hard upon these sort of people. So I guess that yes, there needs to be engagement from the Muslim community, and when we say we are Muslims, we need to actually also act upon the principles of our faith, which our communities, I must admit, have faith.
Absolutely. Mubashar Sahab, very quickly, your take on when the situation will subside.
I would say a few points Umar has taken rightly, like means definitely it's not, it is not very organic. Like I won't see it like what is happening right now on the street is organic. There is an agenda behind, and is very much linked with the Palestinian movement, because we have seen masses of rallies in London and other part of the world. At one point is near to 1 million people were marching London every month. And Suella Braverman tried her best. Here the police system is a bit different. Obviously, they do not just take the instructions from the politicians. They do their own assessment. So that is one of the reasons to either to threaten those people, or option B is they maybe, if for example, if they manage to succeed in that, they may start implementing some sort of law which directly trying to stop them, but indirectly they may stop the Palestinian movements as well. So this is one of the reasons. Secondly, obviously, what we seen in Afghanistan, and obviously when the NATO.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Mubashar Saab, for joining us. And thank you, Mr. Umar Karim, for joining us and being a part of the discussion today. Faisal, we're going to quickly also take a look at what is happening in Afghanistan. And of course, the UN has talked about this and the way that, of course, it poses a threat internationally. And you've actually been very vocal about the ISK threat as well, and the way that it is gaining that mobilization within Afghanistan and it's expanding its reach. But what's your take on when the international community is also taking note and thinking about it from a wider perspective of making sure that there is stability and peace in Afghanistan, because it is important for peace and stability elsewhere?
Yes, and obviously, if we talk about the ISKP, we have been highlighting in our show since a long time that they are the actual threat, because they are the ones who are catering all of the other band outfits or terrorist organizations. They have been doing it since long, and we have been advocating in our show that they needs to be countered at this hour, because if they don't do it, then of course we know that somehow 7/7 bombings and 9/11 bombings, whatever took place, it had somehow linkages within Afghanistan. If they could happen at that time, why not now? ISKP needs to be countered, and it is being accepted by US, accepted by United Nations as well right now, because it is an open nursery. Anyone wants to come and join the terrorist organization and get training and get back to Europe and do whatever they like. I think this needs to be countered, and that is what Pakistan has been fighting. Pakistan's military has been fighting since a long time, and we need to, of course, eliminate them before they become a menace. And in that context, of course, support is required when it comes to intelligence sharing, when it comes to tech transfer, when it comes to supporting on the larger level, on the diplomatic level. I think that is required by Pakistan, and at the same time, of course, this menace need to be countered.
Right, absolutely. And Farrukh, I want your perspective as well in terms of the way that this is being taken a look at, especially after the Moscow attacks as well. And now, of course, with the international community also understanding that there has to be a peaceful way forward with Afghanistan. And we've seen action being taken on that front as well. But what does that mean, particularly when we talk about the ISK or the threat of terrorism emerging from Afghanistan? What does that action entail?
Right. First of all, I think that it means that Afghan Taliban have failed in their undertaking to the Americans, as there was this agreement, Doha Accord, that they will not allow their land to be used against any other country, right? ISKP might be a very important issue, and it has also attacked Pakistan. But as you pointed out, that Moscow attacks also did take place, and it is connected to. And then you might have also noticed that right when Palestine has become a big issue, at that time all of a sudden you see repeated mention of a resurgence of IS itself, right? Not just ISKP, but IS in Europe, Taylor Swift's event as well. So it can be connected with anything. My humble summation is that in the end the ball stops with, the penny stops with Afghan Taliban, and the fact is that ISKP might be an organization that might be using Afghan soil, but there are others who actually have been properly supported by the local government, like TTP, and they are also serious concerns because A, they have badly affected Pakistan. They keep on continue to attack, and then they have this hydra-headed nature that they keep on rebetending themselves into new groups, and those groups actually essentially either are with ISKP or TTP. Remember that many of the people who are now in ISKP were once part of TTP itself, and there seems to be an osmosis going on between these organizations also. So in the end, the question is, how does the world propose to deal with Afghan Taliban? Because when it comes to money, we have seen some very astounding claims regarding how much America has spent on the country after the fall of Ashraf Ghani government, and other claims as well. So in the end, the entire world community will have to actually come up with a plan to take care of the problem without, of course, using kinetic force, perhaps, but then to protest Afghan Taliban to actually carry out something that clears their soil from this kind of elements.
Absolutely. Thank you, Farrukh, and thank you, Faisal, for joining us in the debate as always. That's all that we have time for today. We'll now see you tomorrow.